Hey, my name is Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. And today, as the title says, not reviewing Bantam West by Ike Brunicardi. And the reason for this not a review is because I first played Bantam West back in February, and then I played it a few times in TTS. I got the game, got a few more plays in there, and then held off on reviewing it because I knew it was still going through changes. The nice thing with Bantam West, before we even really get into the game, is going to be the fact that this game is a game that has been in constant development, constantly adjusting to the playtests that have been going on, to the various people who encountered and engaged with the game, and constantly tweaking to adjust to all the various aspects of how this can be a better game. The downside of that is by the time I'm over here now, this game has gone through massive changes to the point that I don't feel comfortable reviewing it yet because I haven't had the chance to dive into all the ways this game has changed. I have a general idea of the various changes it's gone through, but from my last interaction with Ike, from the last interaction of where the game state currently is at, this game has gone through massive changes and will continue to go through massive changes, hence the not a review category. Now that said, it still will have all the usual things about what I liked, didn't like, what I can see others not liking, a general overview of the game. It just comes with a giant asterisk that this game is still in development, is still being changed, and I don't feel I have a firm picture or handle on all the changes that the most recent iterations have gone through, thus the giant disclaimer at the beginning. That aside, Bantam West is a good game. Bantam West is going to be a sandbox game, a what's the word he uses? He uses a something sim, a something sim. I can't remember the name of the term he uses. He likes to use a specific term, an immersive simulator, otherwise known as a sandbox game. This is a game that is going to be compared to Western Legends to a degree, although I think it is much deeper and much more broad in the actual sandbox elements going on here. Aspects of the game have constantly been changed to make it so that you genuinely have true freedom. The game I first played, I had certain critiques that have since been addressed, have since been improved upon, but then things have consistently been added as well to add to the game. Ultimately, in this game, you're playing as an adventurer, a cowboy of sorts, although cowboy, cowgirl, adventurer, whoever you are in this game. And the goal of the game is to get the most notoriety. Now, the nice thing is you can play to any degree of points you want. The full game is going to go all the way to 20 points. The very first intro game you have is going to be up to only 3 points of notoriety, but you can choose whatever threshold, whatever game length you want, and that game length will define the ways you pursue this game, the strategies you pursue, whether you're going for something that's a lot more about the tableau building, so you can eventually cash in late game, versus a game to only 5 or 10 points is going to have less tableau building and more rushing to actually get those points as soon as you possibly can. And it's a sandbox game in the sense that you genuinely have so many pathways to how you get points. You're going to have your personal journey of different things. You know, Ike over here wants to, Jericho Jones over here wants to go ahead and return to his roots as Little Cisco and get involved with fights with various characters. You're going to have characters that are trying to cash in out the bank, trying to return all the money. Although everyone can cash in the bank, you'll have characters who have different strengths in the way they do so. Every character is going to have their own unique journey of skills and abilities of different ways they can earn notoriety in the game. And combined with that, you're going to have an initial pre-game draw where you choose 2 different cards. Think Mamas and Papas from Viticulture. 2 different cards from 2 different decks that will define additional ways and pathways you can have towards the way you will get points in this game. Combine that with a variety of just general things you can do. Cashing in money at the bank, your personal goals, taking out other characters, locking in additional riders. There's going to be a ton of ways. Every time you see a star in this game, every time you cover up a star, it's going to be an additional point of notoriety and the pathways that you can grow your character, the ways you can augment your characters, both taking advantage of their starting abilities, as well as taking advantage of their deck, the way they are stronger in this game, as well as developing your tableau in this game. Because you're going to be doing a lot of things here. You're going to start off in town. Town has a whole lot of buildings, all represented by the buildings on the side. You can go to those buildings, although going onto the buildings early on in the game will not be as helpful as you might think, because you don't have any of the resources you need to actually get what you want. You might want a mount over here to actually be able to travel around the board faster, but you need to be able to afford a mount. It will also give you a point of notoriety. You might want the variety of weapons here, because attacking other players is going to be useful both for pillaging them, for getting various points depending on your skills or what different pathways you have. You may often get points for attacking other players, and so even if you don't have points for attacking other players, you will often be the victim of other players attacking you. If you want to go ahead and head somewhere and then, start digging up all capturing, defeating a wild animal, getting its hide, and then, harvesting wood and whatnot and returning to town, you may be attacked on the way back. So even if it's defensive only, you may want to go ahead and get weapons. But again, you'll need to go out first and adventure. You go to the bar to start mounting your various hides, to mount your wins against nature in the bar for, again, more notoriety. You go to the graveyard, where, you're going to recruit various helpers along the way, and those helpers may die, which will give you different perks in the graveyard over here, different perks that might give you different benefits along the way. So there's a little bit of benefit to death, a conciliatory prize, if it were. There's going to be Rita's Outpost, where you can trade for various goods. All these things are very useful buildings that you will take advantage of in town. But the first thing you want to do is you want to venture out. Now, this board is a little bit more condensed because I'm dealing with a small space for the camera. Ideally, you'd have these a little more shifted out. I have the town board over here. I have my personal player board over here. You're going to need a few more of these for the various players. You have the town locations here, and then the 4 general locations you'll be to venture out to. Now, these do not connect in the typical sense. You'll see various different points of where they connect to different areas on the board. You're going to venture out from town to different areas using the various 4 points around town, going to different areas, different aspects of the environment, and then doing different things. What those things might be will vary. You may want to build a cabin. You may want to go ahead and attack different creatures. You may want to just straight up loot the various resources, harvesting gold in the mountains, wood over here. There's a whole different options you can try to pursue as you adventure out, but they are all essential. And this goes to the tableau aspect of the game, the tableau building aspect, because you're going to adventure. Every time you go ahead and gather resources, you'll get better at that particular gathering. If you chop down enough trees, you do get better at chopping down trees. These people do. I still am pretty bad at it. But that's going to be over here, the tableau building aspect 1. But then when you turn to town, you're going to, like I said already, develop your tableau further from the fight cards, from the mount, from the various skills you can buy, from your riders over here that you'll recruit. From augmenting your skills up. There are a ton of ways to build out your character in this immersive sim, in this sandbox game. Ultimately, the game comes down to trying to see those pathways of how you get the most notoriety, what things you're going to do. Because again, that comes back to the game length aspect that I talked about already. If you are playing a long game, you may want to spend as much time as possible becoming better at mining gold, gathering the various crew that will help you carry more gold back to town, ensuring you have the weapons to stay well defended against whoever's going to attack you, making sure you build a cabin so you can take shelter from the elements and you don't lose vigor every single night in this game. There are a lot of pathways to victory and a lot of ways to build your tableau. And that might be very helpful if you're constantly trying to turn around and sell that gold for as much money as possible, cashing in at the bank, and building up your economy or your notoriety that way. And again, that will be a very different conversation depending on whether it's a 5, 10, 15, or 20-point game. There's other aspects to talk about. The combat in this game is going to be a bit of a rock, paper, scissors simulation. You're going to have different cards that will potentially involve running away, potentially involve doing damage to other players, but all of them work off of a rock, paper, scissors mechanic of an idea that run, fighting, blocking, punching, they all have different strengths and different ways they can be countered in this game. So you're going to play cards trying to predict to a certain degree what your opponents will do. Now, it is far more than just rock, paper, scissors. There's going to be abilities on the cards, there's going to be ways of mitigating different effects, ways of damaging opponents, and of course different abilities and augmented weapons that will help you as well, making it so that you have a stronger chance. The rock, paper, scissors is developed throughout the course of the game, but it does start off with that as far as the basic mechanic. You're going to have a variety of events in this game. Events, a whole giant stack of events. There's tons of different events that are going to be taking place when you travel to different locations, giving you just tons of different pathways. Think about, you have a card, the Wandering Merchant. You come across a wandering merchant resting his weary horse by the side of the trail. Sporting a flamboyant feather in his hat and a roguish smile, with practiced charm, he leads you to his coach wagon and shows you his wares. This is going to cost me more than I wanted to. He buys resources for 1. Ooh, look at that, I can sell. Or he sells resources for 2. All transactions must be made at once, then discard this card. So it's going to give you different options in terms of these events, different encounters you can have, sometimes different choices. That one wasn't a choice-based one, but you will have different choices. You're mugged by a bunch of people. Do you either just lose $1, or do you try to fight back, which might result in you losing life, or may result in you actually taking their money instead? There's going to be choices and encounters and sometimes tragedy as well. You'll have some cards that are just straight up negative in the way they impact perhaps yourself or perhaps all players in the game. That is going to be a high-level overview of what Bantam West offers. There's a lot going on in this game. There's a giant player tableau over here that you can develop. There are skills you can increase. There's going to be your health you're managing, your inherent player ability. There's going to be a personal set of goals, the cabins you're building that are all unique. A ton of different ways to develop throughout this game. And there's a lot going on. The art and world building in this game is excellent. From the very way even these various outposts just flip to the night phase if you want to do that. I generally don't bother, but you could flip it to the night phase if you want. And you're going to go ahead and just the general art, the characters, the fact that you have this graveyard, the full degree of world building in Bantam West is incredible. And this open world game truly is open world. One of my first pieces of feedback when I first played the game was that I liked it a lot, but I felt certain characters were driven towards certain directions in the way they had a advantage to playing a certain pathway. This person would rather mine gold. This person would rather attack other players. It felt like you were pushed in a certain direction. And that's something that's changed and developed throughout the course of the game. It really has developed to a full open world. Yes, you have your inherent skill that you're going to start off with, but the full degree of cards you have and the different pathways you can try to pursue as you try to take different skills or directions towards winning, it really has moved into a full open world game. And these events, something that's one of the more recent additions to the game. just having a ton of variety of different things that you'll encounter as you progress through this game, as you play through different levels and doing all of that. It gives you another degree of thematic immersion that is present left, right, and center in this game, from the way you're going to attack other players, from the way you'll try to retreat to safe spaces over here. You're going to be attacked in town, and you can try to fight back, or perhaps you run and try to retreat somewhere where you can't be killed or captured, where you can sell your goods before the person tries taking you out, because sure, they might get a point for killing you, but they're after more than just a point. They're after your, backpack full of gold at the same time. There are a million pathways to victories, a million ways you can build out and develop your tableau. And that variable game length is not just a factor to be accommodating to different player counts, or not player counts. It's not just a factor to be accommodating to different lengths of time that you have available, but it really will change and pivot the strategy you have in this game. Genuinely, playing a 5-point game might be a full hour. It's not a half game. The 3-point starter game, I'd argue, is a half game, but the 5-point game is genuinely a full hour-long experience. And it involves variable different strategies you will want to pursue compared to a 20-point game. A 20-point game might be a full 3 or 4 hours potentially. Now, it won't be the 5 points. Since you're building a tableau, it will escalate faster as you go through things. But nonetheless, a 20-point game might be a full 3 hours potentially if you know the game well, possibly even 4 if you're starting off straight off the bat. But either way, they all provide different pathways to victory. So they accommodate you both in terms of accommodating to whatever gap of time you have available, while providing genuinely actual full experiences, but also give you variable pathways to how you want to pursue different strategies you're going to have to think about as you go through the game. And the tableau building. If you know me, you know that I like skills and abilities left, right, and center. And this game gives you a lot of different ways to build up your tableau, ways to develop your deck, ways to add to your horses, ways to get more crew. There's a ton of different ways you're going to get stronger in this game, the ways you're going to persist against both the environment, against other players, against everything the game chooses to throw at you in this game. Now, there are some things I don't like, and the first one's going to be the most evident that you can already see. The table space in this game is not small. I mean, this is set up over here without some of the things you already need, without the other players present, and it takes up a decent amount of table space. This is not something that is going to fit on a small table. This is something that's going to require a decent amount of real estate to accommodate. It's something that I can accommodate, fortunately, not on this table, but on my upstairs table, but it's something that you do want to be mindful of if you get this game, that you're going to want some degree of table space. Now, the nice part is it is modular, so all these various sections can be configured to whatever situation you have, but at the end of the day, you're still going to need that square footage. You're going to need that real estate to make this game work. The events, I love the events. I've talked about this already to a degree. What I don't love is I don't love the tragedies, and the tragedies are going to be any card really that's just inherently negative, any card that doesn't really offer you a pathway. I don't love in games when you might draw a card that gives you the opportunity to buy and sell at the merchant, and then I'll draw a card that gives me frostbite or some sort of tragedy. Now, across the course of the game, those things might average out, and one of the things that's nice is they specifically have it structured so that the tragedies are shuffled into the bottom half of the deck, so they won't show up as much in the first half of the game when they would matter most, because a first turn gap in luck can have such a huge ramifications, as opposed to later in the game, it might be much lesser in terms of the gap. That said, I still don't love it, but the good news is if you don't like it enough, just take them out of the deck. You don't need to play with the cards. There's a ton of cards that are much more variable in the general idea of good, bad, or neutral that they provide, that you can take out the few negative cards and it won't make a big difference to the stack of cards you have in front of you. The rock, paper, scissors mechanic, you may have heard that and cringed. I personally did. I don't love rock, paper, scissors mechanics in a game that is otherwise this developed, that is otherwise this strategic. I think that the mechanic is not as bad as you might think, to be very clear. I don't love it, though. I still don't love it, even with all the mitigations going on. I don't love the fact that my winning or losing, and I don't mind if you get a point. I do mind if you take my backpack full of gold that I've been working on for the past 2 turns. And the fact that I might lose on a rock, paper, scissors mechanic doesn't feel as... I don't love it. I'll say that much. I really don't love it in the game. It does work. It does fine. It's not as bad as you might immediately think. And it does have a degree of counting cards to a degree of figuring out what your opponents have left and trying to predict and read them. At the end of the day, though, it still feels like rock, paper, scissors, which is not that bad if it just comes down to you getting a point. But it is that bad if I feel like I've wasted the last 2 turns because you just stole my backpack full of gold. And so, again, I think the overall mechanic is fine. I love the weapons and the augmenting and all that. But the starting basic rock, paper, scissors mechanic is not something that I love in this game. And it's not an easy game to jump into. It's something that's worth noting. This game does have a tutorial degree to an aspect. It has a fresh start or a welcome, I can't remember what it's called, a new welcome, whatever it's called, the starting tutorial they have where you play the 3 points and you go through some basic mechanics. And it does have the advanced mode separated out so you can play through a lot of the game mechanics and then dive into more advanced aspects. That said, even the basic game is going to have so much going on because it's a sandbox, because it's open world, in order to give people those options, in order to give people those strategies of how they can just do whatever they want in this game. If you don't hold people's hands, the downside, the flip side of that conversation is that there's not holding people's hands. They walk into a game where they can do everything and that can cripple your starting turns as you try to figure out, what do I even do in this game? Now, it does help if you just point people to their various cards. If you say, hey, here's a little to-do list. You can kill an enemy, buy a horse, build a cabin, purchase a weapon, or master an endeavor. Go ahead and think of one of those 5 things you want to do and just start moving towards that. And that's really the way I would suggest people to go through the game. Now, I do believe they do have plans to have a kind of guided walkthrough of literally just scripting you through a few starting turns, which might give you a feel. Even if you don't actually play it, if you just read it, it might give you a feel for how things play out in this game. But at the end of the day, this is a game that is not easy to jump into. This is a game that needs multiple plays just to see everything that's going on, which just puts a barrier of entry on this experience. As far as I can see, others not liking, as far as what might be a problem for you, but was not a problem for me, is, like I said already, you can be targeted and pillaged in this game. Now, I debated whether to put this into what I don't like versus what I can see others not liking. I actually don't mind the fact that you might target and pillage me. It's something that I have to be mindful of as a player. What I don't like is narrowed down to the mechanic involved. I don't like the fact that the rock, paper, scissors mechanic combined with that is what's going on. But the actual idea that you might chase me down and steal my gold, it is another aspect of this game you have to consider, and it's not so ridiculously punishing that it's going to really hurt you, but it does involve, I remember one game in particular where I had this thematic aspect of I just chopped down on my wood and I was trying to head back to town. Another player was chasing me, and my fighting mechanics with them involved me trying to run away. I didn't even try fighting them. I just wanted to escape, so they kept trying to attack me, and I kept trying to run away before they could reduce my vigor to 0, and then eventually I managed to sell my stuff before they got to me. They killed me in the end, but they didn't get the trees that I worked so hard for. But while I don't like the feeling of having your stuff stolen, the fact that it can be stolen provides a different direction, a different mindset you have to play this game with that, again, something you might not like, something you can be mindful of, but it doesn't actually bother me past the rock, paper, scissors mechanic attached to it. The disconnected boards might be a thematic disconnect. I talk about the thematic immersion of this game, and I mean it. This game has a ton of stuff going on, and it feels like you're developing your pathways. It feels like a sandbox adventure. And then you kind of look over here, and you have these 4 boards, which are just completely disconnected. Kind of visually, it looks a little off-putting. They're really just 4 different separate environments, but table space might require that they are so together that it might just throw you off there. A small little thing, small nitpick, but just worth addressing. And then lastly, there is dice rolling in this game. Now, it's minimal, and it's primarily going to involve, like, when you're chopping down resources, could involve some other things as well, but primarily, I think the most common example of it is going to be when you're trying to harvest resources in this game. And I don't mind that either. I find that there's enough resource harvesting that across a few rounds it will average out, but understand that, again, you might have that disconnect of somebody tries to harvest gold and gets 3 gold in a row, and you try to harvest something even easier to harvest with a lower threshold, such as wood, and you only get 1 wood across 3 rolls. That can happen, and worse, it can happen early game when those small differences in luck might expand, especially across the course of a 20-point game. As far as my final thoughts on Bantam West, like I said in the beginning, this is not a review. What that means is this game, when I first played it, I really enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun with it, and the way I put it to the designer is I'm going to give you as much feedback as possible because I really like the core of what you have here, and I just want to make it a better game for me, selfishly. Speaking selfishly, I want this to be as good a game as it possibly can. And some of the critiques I've had have been worked on. Some of them are just something that's part of the game. It just might make it slightly less right for me, but still a game that is worth exploring. Overall, initially, I think this would have been a 4 out of 5 for me. Now, the lack of rating here is the fact that the game has developed since then, and arguably it has developed to a game that is less right for me. The degree to which this game has had things added, the degree to which this game has become far more of an immersive simulator than it ever was when I first started. The branching pathways you had when I first played this game were decent. They were large. It was a game that had a lot of choices and pathways, but those have only been expanded upon further as this game has gone further and further into development, which the good side is that gives you a degree of depth to this game, a degree of depth that I think is the right development choice. I'll get to that in a second. But at the same time, it comes at the cost of the accessibility. It comes at the cost of jumping right into it, and it's one which I have not had the opportunity to fully explore all the changes they have since made, hence my hesitance to give a review past saying I really like this game, and I think overall the changes are mostly positive with the cost of the complexity being added to the game. As far as why I think it's a good choice is, this game will be compared to Western Legends. At the end of the day, if you promise somebody a sandbox exploration game that is a Western theme, the first thing that's going to pop into mind, at least in my own mind, was Western Legends, which is promising you the same thing. Now, I've played Western Legends, granted not with the expansion, so take it with a grain of salt, but Western Legends is such a simple game, not a bad thing, but it is such a simple thing in the degree to which that game offers you a sandbox experience. The pathways are much more linear. It's not less about a sandbox experience, at least base game, and it's far more about giving you a few pathways to how you can proceed, and then watching players try to execute on the slight differences of the way those pathways intersect. I like Western Legends, to be very clear, and I would argue Western Legends is an easier game to jump into, an easier game to pick up, and an easier game to get behind at first. But I think Bantam West, one of the ways that they are strongly differentiating themselves from Western Legends is they are giving you much more of a sandbox experience. If you've ever played Western Legends, if you ever thought to yourself, I like this game, but I want to feel like I have more choice, then I think you should be checking out Bantam West. This game gives you a ton of choice. The game gives you a ton of ways to actually build up and develop your tableau in a way that really feels like you are defining the pathways your characters will take. This is a game that, for better or for worse, is going to be much more complex than Western Legends, much more in-depth than Western Legends, and give you a true meaty sandbox, immersive sim, whatever you want to call it, experience that I don't think I've seen recently in any other game. This game is a prototype, by the way. Probably should have said that in the beginning. It is currently or soon to be on Kickstarter. There'll be a link down below. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you enjoyed this video, and as always, have a good one.